It's no secret the Cleveland Browns are the worst run organization in professional sports. It's been that way for a while, and I don't think the fortunes are changing anytime soon. But as internet GMs, Amir is joining the show, and the Browns have the number 2 overall pick. Can we select the right one to set this organization in the right direction? If you are an NFL fan, let us know down below what you would do. And while you're down there, drop a like, subscribe to the channel. Let's get into it. Let's kick it off here. Of course, trading down is technically an option here, but as a Browns fan, I don't want that to happen. So these are our option A, B, and C for who we could draft at the number 2 overall pick. And of course, also, I'm projecting Cam Ward is going to go number 1 to the Tennessee Titans. It seems like a foregone conclusion that has already been done. Option A, we can draft the never before seen Travis Hunter, dual threat athlete. And I say dual threat because, of course, he plays both sides of the ball, and it's not just here and there. Last year, he led college football in snaps in totality by a wide margin because he was elite on both sides of the ball, and it just seemed like he made play after play for the Colorado Buffaloes, and of course, that's why he won the eventual Heisman Trophy. His teammate, Shedeur Sanders, son of Deion Sanders, as that is well documented, he is probably the best quarterback that we have a chance of getting here in the NFL draft, and we could get him at number 2, but there's some questions, and we'll talk about that later. And, hey, if we just want to say we don't want the baggage and the media attention of the Colorado guys, and we just want to draft the safest player in the class, that's Abdul Carter, a guy that can go on the other side of Myles Garrett, and he can dominate because they're both freak athletes, and when Myles Garrett has a running mate, he won Defensive Player of the Year, and that was with a washed-up Jadeveon Clowney. Imagine a young, fresh, exciting, super athletic Abdul Carter. That could unlock the defense. So those are 3 options so far. Amir, as a Browns fan, I want to ask you this before we get into the rest of today's video. 2 things. Who do you want the Browns to draft, and who do you think the Browns would draft? And we'll revisit these questions at the end of today's show. But as of right now, Amir, what are you thinking?
Well, as a Browns fan with the number 2 pick, I want to lean towards Shedeur Sanders, and and the reason why is because I believe for Shedeur, I believe his floor is higher than Cam Ward's. For Shedeur, I believe Shedeur, you can plug and play him right away. You can go ahead and throw him in, and basically any scheme, he'll at worst be an above average quarterback. As if for Cam Ward on the other hand, even though he's going number 1, I mean Cam Ward is a guy where it's like, you kind of have to let him develop a little bit, just based off of his play style, the fact that he's a gunslinger and everything. And at first I was kind of leaning towards Abdul Carter, but the problem, with that is the fact that I really don't want to draft the edge rusher at 2 unless he's truly just like a generational prospect. So in my opinion, if it's not Shedeur, I'd rather lean towards Travis Hunter.
I will say this in the defense of Abdul Carter, and we'll talk about this here in just a moment. He, I think, is the safest player in the class. Do I think he's maybe has the highest ceiling? I think far from it. I think there's a lot of players that have ceilings of Hall of Fame level in this class. But Abdul Carter, I think, is a very safe pick. I think we get a Pro Bowler if we go in that direction. But let's break down these guys, Amir. Option A, let's start with the Heisman winner. I already kind of glazed him just a moment ago, but let's continue to do that because he was that tremendous this past season. Honestly, we say it all the time, but he is generational as far as an NFL athlete and prospect that's coming to the NFL. But last year at the cornerback position, which most see as his primary position, he had 7 pass breakups and 4 interceptions. You might look at him and say, well, Owen, okay, those are great, but his size, though, that's not going to translate to the NFL level. He was top 5 in the nation as far as cornerbacks that played a certain amount of snaps for missed tackle rate. He only had a 9% missed tackle rate despite being a little slim as far as his size and a thinner frame. So he's not afraid to get down and dirty to tackle some of these big time runners that he was facing on a weekly basis. Now, as a receiver, his stats look like the best receiver in the nation, and he could be both, Amir, the number 1 corner and the number 1 receiver heading into this NFL draft. He had 96 receptions, 1.2 thousand yards, and 15 touchdowns. I think it's no shocker to say he has the best ball skills in the class. First team All-American to top it all. First team All Big 12 or whatever conference he was in. He won so many awards, you lose count. Travis Hunter going to the Browns, Amir, I believe we give him. We're one of the few NFL teams that gives him that full flexibility to play
Mhm.
both sides of the ball as much as he would like to. Because we have young and fun corners in Martin Emerson who should bounce back. Same can be said with Greg Newsome. Last year, of course, they were terrible. 2 years ago, they were amazing. So, what really are we getting out of those two corners in Emerson and, of course, Newsome going forward? I will say this: they're both heading into contract years. So if we get Travis and he says, you know what, I don't want to do this, I just want to play corner. We already have our cornerback two replacement. We can get rid of Emerson and Newsome going forward. But if Newsome and and Emerson come out and they bounce back this year, and we decide to re-sign them, we got a guy that can still be a great cornerback one or two and be dominant offensively as well, which we are desolate in that regard. Amir, I just think that Travis Hunter is such a special talent, and we talked about this yesterday. You will find another Abdul Carter before you find another Travis Hunter, simply for the fact that we've never seen a Travis Hunter. Amir, your thoughts on Travis Hunter and potentially drafting him with the number 2 overall selection?
Yeah, I mean, this guy's amazing, and the fact that he's a lockdown corner and also an amazing receiver. But when I watch Travis Hunter and I see him play receiver, it's really crazy because he still hasn't fully reached his ceiling yet. When I
I
watch him,
agree.
me being a defensive back, in college football, when I watch Travis Hunter as a receiver, a lot of his plays are being made off this raw ability and raw talent. But when I watch him at corner, such a polished corner already, his ball skills are the best in the class by far. And I mean, this dude is around 6'1", slim, but a crazy athlete. And so for me, honestly, if we got him at 2, I would not be upset because I mean, we bring this guy in, he could literally play both sides of the ball on an NFL level. I would want to lean more towards defensively. Kind of build up our identity on defense. Unless our offense just completely just like out of whack and completely going downhill, and we need more firepower. I wouldn't be opposed to him playing receiver, but I would really want him to come in and be a lockdown corner right away.
I think that's kind of that's the consensus right now. I think a lot of people see him as a true number 1 lockdown corner that occasionally can go to offense, kind of like Deion Sanders did back in the day. Travis Hunter, again, I think the difference with between him and Deion was just a crazy athlete. So when
Yeah,
Deion went to offense, he was just outrunning everybody. But for Travis, he can actually run a route
yeah,
tree.
he
He can
can.
actually, go one-on-one with some of these boundary corners. And I think that's what makes him intriguing to bring him to the Cleveland Browns because we just need the best player available. But let's move on here to his teammate and the son of Deion Sanders, which I've mentioned already twice this video. If you haven't heard it already, there's twice more. This is a guy that I believe does have the highest ceiling out of any quarterback in this class. A guy that is the most accurate quarterback in this class, and he provides probably the best leadership out of the quarterbacks in this class. There's questions on why, if for the traits that I just mentioned, why is he not the consensus number 1 guy, right? We'll talk about that in a second. But this is a guy, Amir. The biggest thing that I like about Travis Hunter is not his accuracy. It's not his leadership. The fact that he is so battle tested. The guy has been
Hmm.
what was it? Jackson State turned that program around in a year or so time with his father. Then they go to Colorado, a big time, I guess NCAA school, turns that program around in 2 years. And both of those programs are in way better spots than where they were before Shador graced their campuses with his presence and his playmaking ability. I just like the fact that this guy he knows what it takes to turn a program around. Now it's a lot different at the NFL level, especially when you talk about an organization like the Browns that, well, seemingly curses quarterbacks. But Shador, I like the fact that he's been able to battle through adversity year after year, and it seems like his job's never been easy, but he's still making it work. That's my biggest thing about Shador Sanders. He does have a 4 touchdown to 1 interception ratio last year. That's my favorite thing to look at for quarterbacks. 40 total touchdowns on the year. Of course, I think he had like 36 passing, got some done on the ground. And when you look at him, when you watch him on tape, I think he might be the most fun quarterback to watch because of the fact that his mobility and his, I guess, play extension ability is there, right? Because he's not used to having great offensive lines. So on the pro side of that, he's been able to have these crazy highlights where he's extending plays, breaking sacks, and getting, creating big plays for his offense down the field. But on the con side of that, Amir, he had the highest self-induced pressure rate by any quarterback in the nation by an alarming 7%. He was at 27% of plays he put himself in pressure. So that wasn't just his offensive line being terrible because they weren't a great group, but he wasn't doing himself any favors. He was putting himself in pressure, maybe trying to do a little bit too much as far as creating a big time play, and he was causing himself to get in a lot of sacks. We saw it a lot there in
Mm-hmm.
his final game as Colorado Buffalo against the BYU Cougars. There we go, not the Tigers, the Cougars. Where he got sacked like what 6, 7, 8 times because he was putting himself in those situations. So you worry a little bit about that. But as far as leadership, as far as his ability to battle through adversity, play after play, year after year, you like those things about Shedeur Sanders, Amir, and we need that in Cleveland. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and, I love Shador, and you brought up a great point. The biggest reason why is because I mean this year he threw 37 TDs and only 10 interceptions. Before
Yeah,
that, only 3 picks. Before that, only 6 interceptions. And so this is a guy who takes care of the football. Who's smart. The only concern, and you honestly already brought it up, the fact that a lot of times through this season, people will kind of point towards how bad his offensive line is. But with Shador, teams will kind of rattle him early, hit him early. Then after that, he'll be a bit rattled. Try to do too much, try to force throws down the field off his back foot, rolling out, fading away and stuff like that. And it really caused, way more pressure than he was actually getting at times. And
yeah.
that's the only thing that's a bit of a concern. But, with that being said, for Shador, I think Cam Ward has the highest ceiling, but Shador is more ready right away. With his play style, and I already brought it up, it'll be so much easier to really throw him in any scheme realistically. And and this is a guy who transferred from different schools, way different media pressures on him, media really bashing him, and he's still finding a way to really up his draft stock and still perform against really really good teams. And that's a big thing to also look at as well. And so I think for him, I would love to get him at 2. I'm not, gonna go as far to say he's generational or some top tier, generational talent as a quarterback. But at some point, we got to kind of break this curse, and I think if we get him at 2, just given the fact that the rest of the draft class really isn't like a generational type draft class, so where it's like we can really get some top tier talent late in the draft, in my opinion. For what we need as a team. So I think we draft Shador at 2, and then eventually go from there.
This is my rebuttal to that, Amir, and I think you've already kind of heard this spiel, but let me, I guess, bring in the audience on this conversation. This was my rebuttal to drafting Shedeur Sanders or really any quarterback at number 2. When you look at the elite quarterbacks in the league, they have either revived a franchise or they've elevated a franchise to Super Bowl status. Well, let's just look at the top guys, for example. Patrick Mahomes came into a pretty good situation, but he elevated them to levels beyond, winning them 3 Super Bowls. When you look at Josh Allen, he took a dead franchise and made them relevant because he was just that damn good. Same can be said about Joe Burrow. Lamar came into a good situation like Mahomes, and he's won 3 MVPs for Lamar Jackson. When you look at these guys, you have to really be an elite quarterback to take a franchise that's dead and to elevate them to being a playoff caliber team year after year. And if you're Mahomes, Super Bowl caliber team year after year. Now, I don't think Shador, I don't think Cam Ward should be compared to Mahomes' success. That's unfair to anybody on this planet. But I don't think that you can bring in a quarterback that we look at and say, okay, his ceiling is kind of 10th best quarterback in the league. I don't think you can bring a Dak Prescott to the Browns. I don't think you can bring, a guy in that range to the Cleveland Browns and all of a sudden we have hope that we can be a top tier team. So I don't want to bring in another quarterback, ruin his career when we don't have the necessary tools around him to keep him or to allow him to, I guess, elevate this team. I don't think Shedeur Sanders comes into a Browns offense with Jerry Jeudy and whoever we else decide to bring in, and all of a sudden we are excited about this offense. I don't think he elevates the ceiling, and that's not his fault. I think he's going to be a great player, just not with the Cleveland Browns. We don't have the roster around him we don't have a great situation for him to walk into. Like the quarterbacks that I mentioned earlier, for him to eventually be an elite quarterback, which is kind of why you draft a quarterback at number 2. You don't draft him to be mediocre. You draft him to be an elite, franchise-changing quarterback. I just don't see that with the roster we currently have. Amir, your thoughts on that regard as far as I don't think bringing in a top 10 to 15 quarterback really changes our franchise's future.
That's honestly a great point. But my biggest concern is, I'm not really sure that Stefanski in this team can really develop, any quarterback if you draft him later on. And I know a lot of mock drafts have us draft, getting a guy like Jackson Dart, Will Howard later on. Personally, I don't trust Stefanski and this team to really develop those guys. And I don't want
Not
to
to
be in
cut you
in a,
off.
in a position.
Not to cut you off, but
Yeah,
to be fair, I don't think we draft any quarterback this class. If we do, maybe take a
right.
late shot on somebody, but I'm really in the camp of just building this roster up so 1 or 2 years down the line we can get a guy like Arch Manning or DJ Lagway.
Yeah, but the problem is, for me is like, I think Stefanski's a good enough coach to where it's like, we'll sort of be like, kind of like Pittsburgh, win 7, 8 games to where it's like it'll be really tough for us to really lose enough games to really get a top three pick. And it's like, you go ahead and draft Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter, going to the next, we might end up winning 6 games, and that still might be enough, or 2 years from now. And I think teams are going to literally have to win at max 3 to 4 games to really get a guy like Arch or Lagway, and that's my biggest concern.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, getting a quarterback like this and getting a draft position like this comes with a price, and that is, like you mentioned, winning 3, 4, 5 games at most five, in the Jaguars' case. But honestly, I think, hey, you look at the roster, and let's say we stick with Kenny Pickett this year, we're going to struggle. Even though it's a very quarterback friendly scheme, the quarterback is the most important position on any team that wants to contend, and Kenny Pickett's just not that good. So we're going to struggle, win 6, 7, 8 games, at most 8 games, right? With that fact, do you believe, Amir, that a guy like Miles Garrett, a guy like Joel Bitonio, a guy like Denzel Ward, 2, 3 years down the line, where these are really the last decent and productive years of their career for Miles, it's going to be a little bit longer. Do we want to, do they maybe want out in 2 years? Do they maybe want out right before we have a chance to go get one of these elite quarterbacks or potentially generational quarterbacks down the line? I understand this is future thinking. I understand as a Browns fan, you might want to say, that's not exciting. I don't really want to sit here and watch us struggle, but I'm just being realistic. The Browns really need that generational guy to turn this franchise in the right direction. And that's why I think, 2 years down the line, maybe Miles doesn't want to be here. Maybe Denzel and Batonio don't want to be here, and they either retire or want to get a trade. Your thoughts on that, Amir? Do you really believe that Miles and Denzel and guys like Joel Batonio are going to want to be here for the long run if we don't draft a quarterback this year?
Yeah, I definitely don't think so. And it's one
And
of those things
that
where
goes
it's
to my
like,
point.
right,
I'll
yeah,
let you go ahead, but that just adds on to my point that they're not going to be here, so we're going to suck anyway.
yeah. And the thing is too was like, for Miles Garrett, I mean, like realistically, we know why he signed the money, right?
Right.
And so, for Miles, he's probably looking at the franchise like, all right, even though if we don't get a quarterback, we might struggle, but it's like eventually, he's going to get tired of that. And the only person I can maybe be seeing is Denzel Ward, and that's maybe because he grew up in Cleveland, that's his hometown and where all his family is at.
Kind of
But
forget
for
that.
Miles Garrett and a guy like Joel Bitonio, I don't see them wanting to stay here. Even if we do tank, eventually you're going to get tired of losing every single year and year. And personally, I thought we should have traded Miles the second he asked.
I agree.
Possibly got a haul for him, or maybe even trade down and just do something else. But instead, we give him all this money, and so now we're already struggling financially, and so now we're basically going to rely on drafting well. When honestly, Andrew Berry hasn't drafted well at all, in my opinion, these past 4 to 5 years.
There were reports, Amir, that teams were willing to give us 3 first-round picks for Miles Garrett. His draft price or his trade price will never be as high as it is now, unless
Well,
this year he goes out and wins another Defensive Player of the Year. Then I think we have to. We're going to be forced to explore trading him
yeah,
yet again next offseason. Because of the fact that we're just not in a situation to contend. That's what he wants to do. And eventually, you just got to do what's best for the franchise. And hey, he doesn't want to be here, like you mentioned. He bashed us on every single social media platform. And then, like you mentioned again, he signed because the money was there. So he doesn't want to be here. He's just here for the money. And honestly, if we're on a team that's not going to contend, I don't know if his production is even going to be as good as it
right,
could be because of the motivational levels. Because that does play a part. Really, we see it in the NBA, but especially in the NFL, that could play a part as well. But if we do keep Miles Garrett, Amir, and he is here for the long run, this is a guy that potentially could unlock the next 4 to 5 great years we have left of Miles Garrett to solidify his Hall of Fame first ballot case. Abdul Carter is an elite athlete. I think he does have superstar potential at the edge position. And this is a guy that the comparisons are there. He reminds you of a Micah Parsons. I don't think he's as good of a prospect as Micah Parsons, but the tools are there for him to turn into that, which is always exciting to, I guess, draft and I guess wait and see. Last year, he had 58 pressures, 12 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. Keep this in mind, he was double teamed more than any edge in the nation. So those are pretty impressive stats. And he had a 23% win rate against double teams and against single coverage in his pass rushing attempts. So he's winning almost a quarter of the time. One out of every 4 plays he's winning. And again, that comes with double teams and chip blocks and all this stuff that these elite athletes have to deal with there on the defensive line. I think he's officially, again, a couple years ago when they brought him into Penn State, he was kind of a hybrid, playing multiple positions. This past year, they really just let him loose. They said, hey, just go rush the passer and unlock your full potential there. And like I just mentioned with his stats, he dominated. I think if he is the number 2 overall selection, which as of right now, if you guys care, he's the Vegas favorite to be number 2 to the Cleveland Browns. I think it's a safe pick. And I think it's a pick where if you throw him on the other side of Myles Garrett, it gives both of them the opportunity at one-on-one coverage, like again, 1 out of every 4 plays. So for these guys, and this is kind of why I'm in the camp of Abdul Carter too, is when Myles Garrett had a washed up version of Jadeveon Clowney on his other side, Amir, 2 years ago, what did he do? That was Defensive Player of the Year, Myles Garrett. Because he didn't have double and triple teams almost every single play, which since we've lost Jadeveon Clowney, Myles has been the most double team player in the league by like 5-6%. It's a wide margin. And for Myles to go back to having single coverage occasionally, I think that opens up the levels of dominance for this defense. Having 2 extremely crazy athletes on either side of these quarterbacks, and they're just able to put constant pressure on Joe Burrow, on Aaron Rodgers, who's going to be a Steeler, and Lamar Jackson. I think that keeps us in a lot of games because that defensive front, it could be special, Amir. Your thoughts on getting an Abdul Carter to unlock the ceilings of both Carter and Myles Garrett?
Yeah, I mean, realistically, I think Abdul Carter is the safest pick. The only thing about Myles Garrett winning that defensive player of the year, I mean, it was still a moment to start that year. We looked at Myles and was like, man, like show up. Like he went like a 4 to 5 week span without getting any sacks.
Yeah.
And the biggest reason why he won that was because Jim Schwartz did an amazing job really boosting up our defense to like the best defense we've ever had in franchise history.
Yeah.
But like realistically, I mean, Carter wouldn't be the worst pick. I just really don't want to be in just a weird purgatory spot where we're winning 7 wins. We're getting 7 wins year in and year out. And really just relying on Barry to draft well because he uses way too many analytics. He's shown year in and year out that he's been struggling to really draft and really build these rosters up, throughout the draft. And so hopefully he does not mess this up.
Yeah. Let me propose this to you, Amir. What if we did draft Abdul and then the rest of our like 5 or 6 picks, we just hammered offense. Like we just went weapons, and hoping that something hits. Maybe we go Jaden Higgins in the 2nd round with pick 33, or maybe we get a running back. Maybe Omarion Hampton falls to pick 33. What if we go Abdul and then just hammer offensive weapons down the board? Would you like the selection then if we just hammer offense to help out that side of the ball?
Realistically, I mean, that wouldn't be a bad idea, but it's like I don't want us to go ahead and just like draft a bunch of offense. We got a bunch of dudes just like Anthony Schwartz.
Yeah,
you know
right.
what I mean?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then they kind of come out from in like this mid area, and they don't really have high ceilings as players,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the kind of player that Barry's going to continue to draft, I think we got a lot more problems on our hand than just the offensive talent. But again, these are options A, B, and C. Of course, the Browns could trade down or, hey, trade up to get Cam Ward if that is on the table, but I don't think that is at this point in time. So, Amir, I want to ask you now. Now, again, I kind of you guys probably can guess, I am in the Travis Hunter camp. I think we can find another Abdul before we find any other version, somewhat half the version of Travis Hunter. I think in the Cleveland Browns situation, you build this roster up to be a great roster, kind of like the Eagles did. And then, a year down the line, 2 years down the line, if you're that confident in a quarterback prospect, you grab him, right? So he has a situation where he can come into, he can learn maybe for 6 to 8 weeks and then take over. And hopefully then we have a guy that's ready to go and to finally command this organization to get to heights that we want to see consistently year after year, and that's at least a playoff berth. So I'm in the Travis Hunter camp. I'm not swayed either way. Shador would be cool. I will say this: I'm not going to be mad at any of those three prospects
Yeah.
that are potentially on the table. I was telling Bakari, good friend of the show, that I'd probably be the most excited if we drafted Shador Sanders. Right now, I'm not in the camp, but if we draft him, I'm going to be blasting his music on draft night. Um, but I think taking a step back, just looking at the organization, don't overthink it. Grab the best player available, and let's address the edge down the board because there's some very talented edges down the board, and we're going to go to that in a moment, Amir. You're sitting in the draft room for the Cleveland Browns. You're next to Andrew Berry. Obviously, he might make a boneheaded decision and take Jackson Dart at number 2. But if you had any say in the decision making here, Amir, where are you going? Where are you trying to sway Andrew Berry to draft on draft day?
So where I lean towards is still Shador. And I kind of brought it up as to why, but I would not be mad at Travis Hunter either. And you brought up a great point. It's a lot harder to find a lockdown corner than a kind of boost up a defensive line. It'll be so much easier to really find some younger talent throughout the draft to really put on the defensive line and kind of have a consistently above average D line. But it's like having a slightly above average secondary is a lot
I mean, look at the
more
Rams.
difficult to
They
really build
found
off
gems down the
of.
board.
Exactly, and so for us, I still want to lean towards Shador, but if we lean towards Travis Hunter, I would not be upset at all.
Yeah.
It would be great for us.
I want to explore these. So, on one case, of course, we could go Travis Hunter at 2. And then again, there's a guy that I really like down the board at edge is Donovan Onzaraku. He's an athletic freak. He tested well. He was very productive for Boston College last year. And again, I think Browns fans, don't forget, we do have the first pick in the second round, right? So we're going to get a very talented player to fall our way. And I think if you want to address edge still on the other side of Miles, I think this really just you're really just hammering this defense and saying Jim Schwartz, the offense, we might not have a quarterback this year, but we need that defense to be top 5 again. And then if Kenny Pickett's good enough in this quarterback friendly scheme, that wouldn't be a bad way to go. Okay. And Browns have other picks down the board. You could still address offense down the board, right? Scenario 2, if you want to go with an Abdul Carter, Amir, I kind of like this one. If you grab Abdul and then Benjamin Morrison, BMO, one of my favorite corners in the class, with his hip injury concerns, he's going to fall to the second round. So if you want to draft him at pick 33, I like that because, again, it elevates this defense and it kind of is reminiscent of when we drafted Miles and Denzel Ward in the same draft. Now you get to do it with Abdul and Benjamin Morrison, and you can bring two worlds together, and we can just have a very talented defensive group. And then, again, I don't have it on the screen, but if you wanted to go with Shador Sanders, getting a Shador Sanders allows you to go with any of these guys, right? Benjamin Morrison, Donovan Onzaraku. You can go Derek Harmon out of Oregon if he falls. You could go with, hey, if you want to go running back, go quit Sean Judkins, even though I think it's a bit of a reach at pick 33. Whatever you want to do, I think with these three players, I'm not mad at any of them, and you have a lot of variety down the board, but we need to, at point blank period, we need to nail these first 2 picks. Amir, your thoughts on the potential scenario and how it could look for us after pick 33?
Ben Morrison is extremely underrated, and I would love to pick him up
Yeah.
early second round. I would not be opposed to that. And realistically, like I think we have to really figure our identity going into this draft. Are we going to sort of just take a step back offensively and say, all right, we're going to wait till later on or wait till next year, or we're going to boost up this defense. That's what I think Barry has to figure out because it's been year in and year where Andrew Barry is just like you can't really tell which direction he's really going in. And so, I really hope he does not swing and miss on that 33rd pick. But
Wow.
realistically, I'd want somebody at that 2 spot. But if it doesn't work out, I would not be upset about us getting Ben Morrison.
Amir,
What happened?
the Browns could have just made us very happy, especially for the trade price, but they didn't. Joe Milton just got traded to the Dallas Cowboys for a 7th round pick. Yeah. Oh no, they got traded to Dallas for a 5th round pick. The Browns could have picked up Joe Milton, and then all of a sudden we're talking about these defensive players uh, getting us excited about that. But kind of crazy. Joe Milton, of course, 2nd-year quarterback. He has the potential out of Tennessee. You worry about that because of how spread out that offense is at Tennessee. Amir, your thoughts on that, man? If you're Dak Prescott, you're sitting in that Dallas Cowboys room before we get out of here. How does that trade, I guess, impact you going forward?
I would definitely look at it like, okay, like this is kind of weird, you
Yeah, because
know.
he's 30.
Right. And so if I'm him, I would kind of take it as like a warning a little bit. Kind of take it a bit personal, but I mean at the same time, I mean they end up trading for Trey Lance in the past to really potentially beat him out as well. And so I mean he just signed his contract too, so maybe it's kind of just like a safety blanket. But if I was him, I would understand like, hey, listen, I understand I just got paid, but my job is potentially on the line.
Yeah. Top 10, borderline ish quarterback, Dak Prescott, looking to bounce back after a horrific knee injury. And Dallas looks to put the worst weapons and options around him. Amir, to circle back here before we get out of here, any last thoughts here? Again, the Browns, terribly run organization, maybe the worst in professional sports ever. Your thoughts here about number two before we get out of here, man?
No last thoughts, man. I say, if we don't go towards a quarterback, I wouldn't be upset. But if that's the case, draft the best player available.
Yeah.
Don't use too many analytics. Don't use all the extra stuff and nonsense. Draft the best players that are available to really boost up this roster.
We also just got a report that Arch Manning might not enter the league next year. And that's because, hey, he's making more money in college right now with NIL deals than he is going to be at the pros. So, Arch Manning, you're going to be a Cleveland Brown 2 years down the line because all of Mannings play 4 years in college. Their father did it, Eli, Peyton, and now it's going to be Arch. They're all going to play 4 years. So we're going to have a loaded class here in a couple years, Amir, where we can get Jeremiah Smith, we can get Arch Manning, or DJ Lagway. Crazy class a couple years down the line. And, well, as Browns fans, that's what we got to look forward to.